So I did the movie Get Out for my signature assignment, and it was filmed in 2017, and the mind behind this film was Jordan Peele. So the first question was what subdisciplines of psychology were relevant to this movie? And I chose two, which was cognitive psychology and social psychology. So I said for cognitive psychology, Get Out is a movie based on fear, uncanny situations, and people who are morbidly racist and have many mental issues. Cognitive psychology deals with our mental processes. There are enormous amounts of many different types of mental processes there are, and how people use them in unique ways to draw conclusions and make decisions. So that can be very hard for our mind to comprehend. But we see this in the characters who are embodied by others, by the main victim, Chris, and especially the Armitage family. Social psychology. So during the movie, most of the realization of the racism and mental illnesses occurs in the social setting when men and women are secretly making bids on Chris, Rose's boyfriend. He then notices all the differences and eventually recognizes someone. So it took him getting into this place in a social setting to where he wasn't the only African American male to realize that something was wrong. And then the next question was what psychological theories are relevant to this movie and how do they or do they not explain the character's behavior? So I picked two for this one as well. I picked the humanistic theory and the cognitive theory. So the humanistic theory is basically the regards of humanity and the individual and the different factors which can contribute to their feelings, actions, and their self-image. To be precise, humanism states that each is unique in their way and capable of change if they choose so. Therefore, based on your personality, you have a different humanistic theory than the next person. In Get Out, we see firsthand how big of an influence our environment, social activity, and mindset can change a person's thoughts and actions. Rose, Chris's boyfriend, appears to be a fun, loving, down to earth, and in love with her boyfriend, Chris. I personally even thought she's going to be my favorite character in this movie. She seems very open to an African American with a Caucasian relationship. But the second her act doesn't add up, she starts to not care about him or his well being, everything changes. Once those factors of who she was surrounded by, her family, and how they influenced her mind and the image of African Americans, she changed her thoughts, feelings, and actions like a light switch. The next one is cognitive theory. The cognitive psychology theory asserts that human behaviors begin with a person's mindset. Within the cognitive theory, attention, memory, and perception of humans are especially focused on. The way people process and compartmentalize information is valuable to understand what we see on the outside. In my opinion, I saw the cognitive theory exploited in Chris's mind. There is a scene where he becomes hypnotized and paralyzed by the mom of the Armitage family all in one setting. She tells him to literally melt into the floor, and we immediately see Chris drop and continue to drop. In his mind, I feel like this is where he lost hope for a few minutes, and his cognitive mind could not pull him back up. It was almost as if it was an analogy of how deep he had gone in his mind. His mindset was completely altered, and his mind perception was off at that point. How can the characters' behaviors be explained in psychological terms? So, three of the major social psychological principles depicted in this movie were definitely prejudice, discrimination, and I believe the biggest one was fear. In the beginning of this film, life is well for Chris and Rose, as you can see on this picture on the right, as they are going to visit Rose's parents, and it seems as if it's almost a romantic movie. Then there is a shift from acceptance and open arms to immediate degrading of Black culture and constant worry as to what the family would do to Chris. The picture depicted below of the woman crying and smiling simultaneously is when Chris almost breaks through to the white woman who has inserted her organs and brain into an African American lady. Yes, you heard me right. She becomes scared and almost remembers how life was before. We see this in other characters as well. All characters show shifts in their behavior, either from welcoming to violent or from safe to in danger. What psychological disorder, if any, was illustrated in this film, and did the person meet the criteria for abnormal in this portrayal? And then what symptoms of mental illness did you see in the movie? After considering typical symptoms and behavior for this disorder, determine the extent to which you believe this was realistic. So I personally believe there was more mental illness than psychological disorders in this movie. Granted, I personally think the Armitage family, especially Rose's dad, had a behavioral/bipolar disorder. Obviously, putting on a front or lying about who his family was not hard for them. They have done it many of times and became obsessed with the thought of their criminal acts. Rose's dad would change emotions from loving to demanding to angry to soft in seconds. I also believe if you have hate for a culture or want to change it, behaviorally, you cannot act up to the standards you should. Therefore, he was either awkward or too much in charge in a setting to where Chris was supposed to feel comfortable. And then throughout the movie, as Chris realized what was happening, anxiety crept into him, obviously, but the Armitage family as well. Chris was fighting for his life, and they were not used to someone fighting back to them. And I also think with someone who has anxiety, this was portrayed perfectly, from the panic attacks to the sweating to all the symptoms that could have came with anxiety disorders. I thought Chris and even those who felt like they were in danger portrayed this very well. What was your overall reaction to the movie and how mental illness or psychological theories were portrayed? So the first time I watched this movie, I was in the movie theater and I actually sat back in my seat in like shock of the plot itself. But I was also moved because I know fear can be depicted in many different ways, especially in this psychological horror. The Black culture experiences every day, and it left me in awe of how scared I felt for them. I believe the mental illnesses throughout were depicted great, as I just said. As someone with anxiety, the reactions were almost too realistic for me for it to be a movie. I noticed little things such as twitching or fidgeting and emotions being scattered, genuine fear of what could happen next. The movie was raw and scary, and it was personally one of my favorites. And I think because of this project, because I'm such a big horror movie fan, this made me pay attention so much more to what this video on the bottom could have been. Like the falling, as I said, he continued to drop deeper in his mind. I feel like this was a great movie to watch, especially in a psychological sense. Thank you.